updated, but this says shall. So I had Matt call and so on the foreign exchange.
May.
Yes, because, and for two reasons. One is
239, Matt.
Yeah, I just couldn't find them.
ta-da.
239.
There you go.
Shall.
So, right, so the shalls to mays, I think we need to have some flexibility in that. The other one is with some of these visas, specifically the F1, you have to be part of what is called a CVIS. You have to make application through the federal government to be eligible to receive those students. We get a lot of calls if we're a CVIS school. I went on and checked the CVIS site. I mean, almost every, in Pennsylvania at least, almost every school that is a CVIS accepting school program is private, parochial. I didn't find a public school that does it. And I think it's because it's so big and there are so many students who are seeking to get into a year in the US. So we've never been a CVIS school. We've never made that application, which we would have to do. We have had foreign exchange students though, so I want to separate the two. So if a foreign exchange student comes in through a sponsoring agency, which would be your J1 visa program, under the right conditions, we do accept those. They make that application through the high school, and you'll see in this policy where it says we can limit the number of foreign exchange students. So, you know, if North already had two and they had a third application, they may say no because of some of the issues that to support a foreign exchange student, depending on you know, what their needs are, what the program is, how long they're staying, etc. So I think the shall needs to be removed, and we need to make may. And again, I'm not sure we will. It would be the board's prerogative that we currently would not accept F1 because we're not a CVIS school district.
You know, it's all the whole. I understand the policy. The policy in many ways is moot because that child, when here, even if not part of an approved program, they're put in the care and protection of a family who is in the school district, who's given that.
So therefore, they're a resident.
Exactly. They're
Well, but they're not a guardian. And that's it, right. So it's not a placement; it's a choice. So there's a slight difference.
Okay, here's what I'm saying. I'm saying, good point. Parents can appoint somebody as guardian.
They can. That's right.
So that person in Germany can appoint that.
That was
Here they
my
don't.
point.
What?
Parents appoint somebody with a New Valley district.
That's my point.
Right.
This is interesting, but, and I noticed like it's grossly reduced from the previous with ages and class schedules. The assumption is they're going to be treated like a regular kid. I fear that I'm the one asking this. It is an interesting challenge because those programs, it's a two-edged sword. Those programs are not normally open to people with disabilities. If a child has disabilities and they pay, we would be able for that. It's a two-edged sword.
And I'll say to you that, you know, from both sides of this, there's been a benefit to our kids too when you have exchange students. They get an opportunity in class to speak about the differences and you know, what happens in their country, both in the educational system, the political system. So there's an advantage. I mean, there are some good reasons why we benefit from having a foreign exchange student too.
Anybody have an objection to this?
No.
Matt, the only thing I ask is that we be very specific that we are rescinding 202.1 and adopting 239. We need to be clear that we have a decision as an adoption. (204) attendance.
So 204, things on this one that, you know, I think need our attention. One is you'll see throughout that everything was what the board shall do. They shall request written requests from parents, the board shall. I changed it to administration. Again, I think the board needs to be caught up in that minutia, and you don't. So we may as well speak to what is actually happening in practice.
So with the mays though versus the shalls, that's not in conflict with any of the
We're not on this.
state laws?
No, we contacted PSBA because they listed shall, and I said, are we required to do this? Because I prefer if you may, and they wrote us back and said that we were able to substitute
Okay.
that. They say shall because they want to encourage it
Right.
and expect boards to approve that. So,
Wait, which one we're on?
now we're on,
That hasn't moved yet.
yes, attendance 204.
Well, and can we just make sure that the references hang with that, because the references are to law, or the reference 13, 14, 13. These are all PA codes, so while I appreciate the notion that you're changing it to administration, can we just confirm that the reference in law is not
That these also board.
right?
Right.
And so if it does, then we need to, if it does reference the board, then we need to insert some authority in here that the board hereby assigns this responsibility to the administration, and maybe add some language around that.
Get that on this one.
Yeah.
So I really want to draw your attention to the second page, because it's difficult to put this into writing, but I want to tell you what our practice is so that you know, because it really differentiates when some of these absences would come into play in terms of the action we would take against the family. So 10 days of cumulative lawful absence is what the state code speaks to before we start to pursue it. But in Council Rock, for the longest time, we've really added an additional 5 days that we allow for family vacation. That is in addition to the 10. So if a family does not take any vacation within Council Rock and they have 10 cumulative days, we start the process with them. If another family has 15 days and 5 of those are for family vacation as approved by the principals of the schools, then that would kick in for that family. So there's a different time in which we would start to pursue some of the attendance violations for students.
I don't like that at all.
Pardon me?
I don't like that at all.
Well,
I just,
it was put into place with conversation with the board years ago. It can change certainly, but that is what's been in place and what we have in practice.
you miss 10 days of school, then we'll give you 5 more. I don't like it at all.
Well, remember, the opposite's true. Sometimes you may take 5 days vacation and then have some lengthy issues. What we also deal with, just so you know, because we have a number of families who we deal with that travel India and, other parts of Asia where just the travel, they have a death in the family, they're gone for a significant amount of time. We would immediately have to pursue because they're going to be out more than 10 days. So at least in this case, it gives us a little flexibility. I'm not trying to convince you to keep it, but I'm telling you that we have, that's not an unusual occurrence for us.
I'd like to say that, or I'd like to see that if you've missed 10 days of absence, you don't get approved for your 5 days of vacation. Something like that. I recognize it can invert. Recognize it can invert.
But aren't these are the 10, 15, isn't that with a parent approval, parent state? It's not just the child being absent.
These are excused absences.
Excused
Right. So we have a note that
Just
says.
a parent taking their child out of school.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, if these are absences that are not approved, in other words, student comes in and parent doesn't write a note, they cut school, any of those kinds of things, then this doesn't come into play. These are for excused absences or any combination of those. But you see what the resulting situation is. They must then have a licensed physician write a note for any future absences. And without that, we now start to go down the children and youth or the courts to involve in attendance.
Immediately after those 15 days, if there's no licensed physician.
No, well, we start and really some of this depends. If part of within those first 10 or 15 days, 3 of those days were unexcused, they either didn't meet our requirement or the parental note wasn't provided, then we start an attendance plan with the family, invite them in. So there are several steps in place as soon as they are getting close to the concern. And then once we fail going through that attendance plan and then they miss these markers, then we have no choice but by law to bring it to the children and youth and or the courts.
Barry, it's interesting that the 4-H and the FFA have a special exception. So what is that about? I think it's good, but I'm
Yeah, I think
curious
that's
that-
just specific to school code and probably because there, a lot of those
Because it
things.
was written in the 1800s.
Yeah, it have.
PA
And
code.
I'll just say the reason I know this, I'm listening to high schools a lot, and mean, these kids do not want to miss school by and large. The kids who do want to miss school, they're unexcused absences. They're the problem kids. What I've seen is, extended family trips, and the kids are fighting the parents the whole time. Because they want to be in school, because they know 5 days out of school is a part. Now, elementary school might be a little different, might be a Disney trip, might be a little more, I would say. But what I've seen, especially in the middle schools and high schools, is the parents are like, oh no, the great grandmother's 90 now, we have to go to Germany. And so I am trusting currently that this is not, oh, these kids like to go to Disney, kind of thing. And I haven't seen any of that in my exposures to schools. And, I don't know if Barry, you guys, if you're hearing, if the principals, if that was the kind of thing that was going on, I might feel differently, but that's why I said, I'm okay with it. My exposure's been very thoughtful, and again, where we have the problem are with the kids who don't have excused absences.
Our attendance rate is well in the mid-90% and above across, so we don't have an attendance issue.
I was gonna say, how many kids are you actually talking about in the paragraph?
Yes.
Several across the district that, our social workers need to get involved with, and often they're just, there are other issues that
That's what
are
I'm
far
saying, so
beyond
that's a
their.
minuscule, that's a very
Yeah.
small number of kids.
They've hit these
Where do you
15 days
stand?
for these kinds of reasons, yes.
Can I ask you one? You kept saying, refer to authorities. Who are the authorities?
Well, the attendance laws just changed this summer. So we are now, and you'll see there's a new attendance letter that is just posted to the website. So it depends. There are two options. One is children and youth are notified, or the district magistrate. So prior to this, it was only the district magistrate, and it was a defined period of time. Now there's some interventions that must occur before you get to that point. So our social workers make that determination, and then would either once they get to that break point, go to children and youth and alert them, and now it's the children and youth issue, or we go to the district magistrate and there's a hearing.
So why don't you just say the appropriate authorities?
What does it say?
Steve, I have a question. So when you say notify the district judge, that's done by citation?
Yes,
Okay, who writes that?
our social workers have the citations.
Children and youth is a big difference between the local, children and youth and the district judge.
Correct.
So,
And that was just added.
that's a scary proposition.
That's new this year.
Maybe you could, at some point, maybe one of the other meetings is update us on how that plays out. Even just have a discussion at a public board meeting, just a brief information.
We can actually bring our social workers in who live it every day,
Well,
and
essentially,
can walk you through the
A
process.
woman who ran against me 2 years ago does a role like that, where she actually goes, she's a home visitor. What is that?
Similar.
Yeah,
Social worker,
okay, okay, so that's,
Home and school visitor.
yeah,
Mhm.
which I always interpreted as being part of it.
So-
One thing, but,
Do you, did I know you?
no,
So do your counselors have discretion of whether they go to the local judge or children and youth, or is there a matrix that says if this, and this, it goes to children and youth, if this, it goes to.
Yeah, I think that the new law gives them some pretty distinct guidelines as to the direction they would take. Yes. And I think part of this was brought on by the courts who said they can't handle the volume. Now, again, not necessarily in Council Rock, but when you think about around state in Philadelphia or some of the urban centers, I think some of the courts just couldn't handle the volume of students being brought to them. You have 3 unexcused absences, and you try to get the student in the 4th and 5th time. Now they're not coming in, not bringing a doctor's note. Now you're just writing a citation, and the courts have to hear it. So it was, pretty difficult in some of those centers.
it is interesting, and so it would be useful to have that, and also it would be interesting that our local justices know, or, we have a good relationship with both of them.
We do.
That's a useful thing. One of the items that concerns me is on page 2, and it has to do with that the board is approving religious holidays. I thought that was an odd one. It's 1, 2, 3, 4.
For the religious instruction.
No, the
Which
board
one?
will request an absence for observance of a student's religion on a day approved by the board as a religious holiday shall be excused.
Mhm.
A penalty shall not be attached to the absence for a religious holiday.
Mhm.
We don't, as far as I know, I question it because suddenly now the board is endorsing
No, we're not endorsing, we were just marking it as an excused absence if a parent.
So the spaghetti monster day is, I mean, you know, my point is, you know, what?
Pirate Day, is it? No, it's the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
It's my spaghetti monster day, you know, it's, you know, pick a day or many days, and so do we have to be involved in that? I just, well, we're not, I just found it odd, we've never had it before. You know, because then I suddenly have to be judge and jury on the religion.
I would say to you that we do get some that I believe are legitimate, and there are very few. When there's a religious observance that a family has and requests the time off, and it's marked as they're absent, it's marked as absent, but it's marked excused as opposed to unexcused.
Okay, but you're only not attaching board for an absence on one of the board is, you're only not attaching penalty if the board is approved of the religious holiday. It's inconsistent, that's all. I'm saying.
Yeah,
So, deal with it if you wish. It's not something, it's just, it's very odd that we suddenly get into the religion. Anybody have an objection to anything that we're in here that would cause them not to be able to approve this at our next meeting? I don't see any items for follow-ups or anything.
and we'll check the administration piece of it to make sure we can substitute that for board.
Yeah, that would be, and if it becomes a problem, we'll probably get Rob to write you an assignment paragraph. You're up to assignment in the district, 206.
Yes. This is really, it's a little bit interesting. So I want to make sure that your sense of this is no different than mine. So under delegation of responsibility, it says superintendent or designee may assign a student to a school other than the one designated for the attendance area when such exception is justified by circumstances and is in the educational interest of the student. I think we need to say or, because circumstances, I believe, is when we cap a grade level and move somebody, but it may not be in somebody's perceived educational interest for that student. So I find it, well, the way it was written was it said and, which means you have to have both of these in place. And I'm saying we move students when we cap a grade level to another elementary school. And
Cap, I just.
Okay, no, we cap a grade level. So somebody could say that's not in the educational interest of the student, but yet we're doing it. So if it's and, I think we have a more difficult burden of proof as to why we're making that change. So I think we need to make that or.
It could be and or be slash, but.
And then the next one, I really don't understand either. So it says the superintendent or designee shall assign incoming transfer students to schools, grades, and classes that afford each student the greatest likelihood of realizing his or her educational and academic goals. I'm not even sure what it means, and I would suggest with PSBA's nod, we take it out. I'm not even sure. I mean, students go to school and we schedule them according to.
But that's incoming transfer students. This one specifically relates to the cap. Because if you put the child into a section, if you put him into, he's number 35 in a section versus going to another building, he's number 17 in a section. I think that's what this is.
Well, I think,
Isn't that kind of covered by the preceding paragraph then?
and I don't think we can say it affords each student the greatest likelihood. I don't even know how you measure it.
Why would we?
Yes.
But it's, I accept the bulletin report is problematic. The introductory part of it specifically is about incoming transfer students. That has to do with the cap, because we don't, if a student already exists in the school, we don't cap them out of a class if they're continuing in that school. The fourth grader doesn't cap out a fifth grade. Only
Yeah.
incoming transfer, fifth grade might be capped out.
Yeah, I read the paragraph above to be encompassing. It says assign a student. It didn't define who the student was, so
Yeah, I don't.
I think
I'm fine with it.
I don't like that whole section.
I
Which
think
one?
that-
the superintendent.
The whole paragraph.
Yes, that.
It's unnecessary.
Yeah, unnecessary.
And create shades of gray.
And create shades of green.
But it was specifically,
Everybody else agrees, yeah.
I understand the bottom part of it, that makes maybe be up for discussion. The bottom part of it is specifically screwed up, but the top part was specifically to address
I don't disagree about that.
transfer students. I don't know.
That was even bad. Yeah, that was really bad.
I already apologized twice today, shut the hell
Naturally quick.
up. I know.
Anything else on this one? The twins were already in place, multiple orders of students and their placement. So that's law too.
Are you comfortable with it now?
Yeah.
All right, and the only thing I want to say about that, and I asked you because I specifically to call it out because I don't want to, almost as a thing that we're not doing it for. We're not doing it to accommodate sports assignments, right? We're not doing it because this team has a better football team than this one, you know, and that's,
Well, there's a PIAA rule that covers that, because you can't transfer schools for the purpose of athletics. So both principals have to sign off that that's why a student's not attending the other.
that's why I'm trying to,
Mhm.
I want to be explicit, but
Yep.
I'll accept that if nobody else is. So this will be approved April 1 next week. So there you're up to withdrawal from school.
208. And again, pretty cut and dry, pretty simple. Talks about students who leave school, and the reality is they can't leave until they meet compulsory school age or, past that 17 threshold. And under guidelines, it just talks about what we try to do if we get actually a high school student who may be considering dropping out and legally can, that we try to work with them through our guidance department, and we do some work with them about career goals, et cetera.
If I have a 17, okay, let me just be very clear. It requires attendance for each student only between the ages of 8, meaning that on your 8th birthday, you can do this, and 17, which means that this does not apply to the child who is 17 years and 1 day? Or does it apply to
Well, I
the
think-
end of their 17?
Are you looking under purpose?
I'm trying to understand what the age limitations are.
So it's saying that even though, in this case, they're defining that between ages 8 and 17, that's compulsory school age. So by law, a student must be in school.
Pause there. My
but-
question is, what does 17 mean?
The day after your 17th birthday or the day before your 18th birthday?
17.
So the day after your 17th.
Soon
If
as
you're 16 years and 366 days, or 367 days.
Then you,
you
yes,
don't- Okay, just trying to get definitions around that.
That's a state statute.
yes.
Well,
They-
I was asking,
the math around the start date.
I was asking the question really around some of our early graduations. That's what I was trying to see how this lines up. That if it ran through 17 years, 365 days, and some of our early graduations would be conflicted with this. That's why I was asking the question.
Well, isn't that different than, I know it came in the end, but there's a difference between withdrawing from school and graduating.
Yeah, it's true, too. Yeah, because students do accelerate through school and can graduate very
That's early graduation.
But-
that's policy.
Okay, but I'm hearing the board affirms that even though the law requires attendance of students between ages 8 and 7, that's why it's 16 and a year versus 17 and any day. Okay. Keep going, Barry, sorry to interrupt.
We're good on, anything else on this policy? This just speaks to our process.
Question on that then.
Mhm.
Readmission. So, first of all, wishes to withdraw, no student close to age, withdraw that consent, or parent guardian notification. So, okay, so supporting justification is kind of interesting thing. We judge their supporting justification.
Well, I think I think really the intent is that the supporting justification is that the parent, the legal guardian is in support of the child.
Yeah, where this is coming up is normally a little different situation to have these situations.
But again, once a student is no longer compulsory school age, even if they don't drop out, we have very little pursuit in terms of, we no longer can, cite them for attendance because they don't have to come to school. So if they are consistently absent and we contact the families and they're not coming to school, we just drop them from our rolls because they're no longer members.
So my question then, when we go back to the attendance thing, how does that play out? Is there any reference there to, or consideration interplay about children beyond the age of 17?
None.
Is there any reference on it? Did I miss that?
Now, let's pull it up. Well, in the beginning, it says attend school regularly in accordance with state laws. So they didn't define it by age, but spoke to it by state law.
Okay, so the senior who cuts a lot of days, they're not under compulsory education,
Correct,
right? They're 17.
correct. But,
So most of my sophomores and most of my juniors and seniors, you can't compel them to come to school.
that's correct. But if they don't come to school, we start withholding credit and,
We don't have to handle it.
Right.
Oh, I got you. I'm just trying to understand,
We
what I,
also game the system.
if it's an unexcused absence, they're not entitled to make up any work. So in other words, if they don't come to school that day and there's a test and it's an unexcused absence, we're not required to allow them to make up any of that work.
just trying to understand the label. Oh, good.
Okay?
So anybody will approve withdrawal from school next meeting? No objection. 17 graduation requirements.
I think graduation requirements were done well with this change made by PSBA, because if not, you would have probably approved 6 or 7 of these, the way the states changed the graduation requirements with Keystone exams and, so we had before tried to redefine graduation requirements in Council Rock. I think the way they wrote it here is perfect.
And we'll continue to change.
And that's correct. So we do list our graduation requirements in our program planning books and student handbooks, so kids see it, parents see it, they know the number of credits, where those credits have to be earned. So it's made very clear to them, but I think from a board policy standpoint, this, allows you not to have to address this several times a year.
I'm confused on the special education students. Students with disability. So we allow them to walk their graduating class, special ceremonies for their graduating class, and receive a certificate as provided the student has attended 4 years of high school. It's not 4 years of council.
Correct.
Fine.
Correct. And this is really for students who may continue into,
13th grade.
Can I ask about the eligible veterans section? So is this just like if a family comes to us and says, my father left World War II, has that ever happened?
it has, we did it in Council Rock, yes.
We did it, if you go down the room down there, we called back as many as we could find of the World War II generation who didn't graduate, they went to service. And actually those were killed, because the ones who came back, I think the ones who came back, something like that, I'm confident of 2 different things. We gave it several diplomas out to World War II vets who left school to fight, to the families. Right, but we also had a separate, was it the same ceremony or a separate ceremony where we,
Was a separate one?
was it a separate one?
When was that?
When was that? I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It was a
Okay.
while.
I was-
Yeah,
I was even-
it was a
So
while.
we
Yeah, it was-
actively reached out to the families.
We did at
That's
that
great.
point, and now they could come to us if there are people that.
Okay.
Yep.
You will find this an interesting note, which was Bobby Dembowski was about to go into the service at that time. He was the speaker as a graduating senior in Council Rock, talking about going into the service. And he went
Give you a
into
sense of the number
the
of years.
Marines, was discovered about a back injury and came out of it, did some missionary work, and went back to the Army. And that's where he was going.
I think it's a nice
Yeah.
program.
I have pictures of, actually, Bernard put that together, give her credit where it's due, she put that together.
So we're good for that one?
I don't give it a complaint. Oh, you're good. Ooh, good stuff.
So student discipline is this is kind of that overarching policy that doesn't speak to details of violations that we get into a little bit later as we start to address each of the big disciplinary issues. So this is just and most of this again is based on statute about what we can't do, should or shouldn't do. And it's our overarching guiding policy to how we implement discipline in the buildings. Jerry, it speaks to disability. I want to make sure you see that at the bottom of page 1. So it does build into that, the specifics. And it kind of, for families, I think what it does is it defines when students fall under our.
Yeah, I think this is good. The whole social media piece is that getting any more black and white to deal with around when we have responsibility to be involved with things that go on social media outside of school that clearly impact?
As soon as it works its way into the school.
That's a judgment call though, right?
Well,
It's always a judgment call. It's always tough, but when the threat is there that it's going to impact us in the schoolhouse, impact students in the schoolhouse, then we have a right to take action on it. If it's something that happens solely outside, and there's no connection, no relation to the schoolhouse at all, unlike our neighboring state in New Jersey, we can't have anything to do with it.
Do we have so out of school bullying on social media? Do we?
Yep.
Do we address that situation?
If it's not impacting the school or any references online to coming into the school or anything like that, then no, we don't.
But it's clearly impacting children's relationships who are in school together, right?
So from a counseling standpoint, yes, we can. From attempting to reconcile the relationship between students, sure we can. From a discipline standpoint, which is what this policy is all about, we have no jurisdiction over that.
Do we have an 800 social media policy?
We have the harassment and bullying policies speak to when those would take effect. So, I think what Robert was explaining is that whole connection to the school district. So when any of the social media speaks specifically about something taking place in the school, now we own it. When the behaviors carried out from the outside into the school now becomes, again, something that we have a greater level of involvement with. But if it is something that's taking place on social media, completely separate from the school, didn't take place on school grounds, using school equipment, and during school time, and doesn't carry into the school, when that's brought to the attention, I mean, we'll work with families to help resolve it. But the reality is, if they were looking for some disciplinary issue, we reference them to the police and say, now it's an outside matter. It'd be no different if the threat were made at the mall to your child. You need to seek the right authorities. It's not, we can't intervene in those matters.
If I have one student threaten another student, and the threat says, I'm gonna meet you in the gym and beat you up, that's ours.
Correct.
That's
If the kid simply says, next time I see you, I'm gonna beat you up. Now, you're gonna make the nexus and say, well, they're gonna see him in school, it's our problem. You know what? You're gonna have a tough, I'm not advocating over there, but making that nexus up here is difficult.
Yep.
Because,
And that's the judgment call.
yeah.
Right. I mean, there is gray to it.
But if it says I'm going to beat you up in the shopping center, we say, well,
Tough luck.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
it's after
That's right.
school hours and it's not ours. I'm not sure what you want us to do.
But if I just gotta ask, because we're out there, that impacts the student's mental state fully in the classroom. I mean, to me, it's
unfortunate.
Well, I think there's a difference between when we would intervene to try to help that student and help the situation versus when we would discipline the.
So we might not discipline, but we might refer to people who could. Would we actively do that?
Yeah, we can conduct a restorative conference with students to try to make them better, yes.
Because if that's going on social media, something's happening on the playground, something's happening at lunch, it's.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
doesn't say restricted, maybe we can't do anything about that, but then activities start to happen. I think the key
Right.
is brought to the school's attention, is my experience. The teachers keep an eye out, the counselors will talk to the kids if they can, and the kids want to.
You know,
We'll tell our teachers to be vigilant, have their heads on the swivel. And then from a counseling standpoint, yeah, absolutely, Andy, that happens. But from a discipline standpoint, we're really limited in what we can do. Essentially, we have the kids, if they're bus riders, we have them from the time they step out of their door in the morning, when they start walking to the bus stop, until the end of the day when they get off the bus, when they get back into their house. Assuming they go straight from their bus to their house. That's the time that they're our jurisdiction.
You know, to your point, if the kid is upset by it or another kid is threatened in some way, I'll give you the analogy, which is if you talk to a cop can tell you, if he really wants to stop a car, he can find a reason by following a car 200 yards. You know, there's something happens. If the teachers are watching for it and the kid acts on any aspect of the threat that he made, although it didn't include the school, they can, I'm not saying they're lying in wait for it, there's no setup, but if they're alert for it, they can be sensitive.
It's tough, it's tough.
It's tough. I think 4 and 6 are trying to address what you're speaking of, the questions you have about this.
Can you also add at the bottom? Delegation of authority, somewhere you talk about printing, we also talk about posting a little bit. A copy of the code of student conduct shall be available in each school library and school office, and maybe print the student handbook as well as, don't we keep it on one web?
Mhm. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
more places I can say you had knowledge of it, the better off I am. You had the hearings where they go, I didn't know.
So these, back to referral, we get referral to law enforcement, you know, right?
Go to your
So this says shall immediately report required incidents and may report discretionary incidents. Is there a list of what required versus discretionary is for the term incident? So it defines incident up top, but it doesn't say required versus discretionary
Tell me where you are.
there.
What are you
Page
referencing?
3, under referral law enforcement.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So some of our policies are very explicit. Weapons, drug and alcohol, as examples say.
So it's also within the policies.
It says we will refer to law
Required and
enforcement, right?
discretionary.
Right. If we have a fight in a high school,
Right.
typically we refer it even though it's not in our policy that we must. Because they're adults, their kids get hurt, and, you know, those we would bring in our school resource officer and have them cited, and then it's an additional matter with the police.
Is alcohol required?
Yes, drug and alcohol is, yeah.
So
You say if they're adults.
If you look at those,
I said they're approaching, I don't mean by legal adults, I mean they're adult-sized people. And, you know, it's a big deal when they start swimming with each other.
So most kids are actually adults.
So everybody, you get in fights at school now, everybody's referred to?
No, middle school, typically we would not, and I'd say it's a fight, it's not a pushing and, you know, bumping, shove, I mean, it's an all-out fight.
one of the things, as Andy and I sit here talk, sorry,
That's why they do. They go. It's a part of life.
as Andy and I were sitting here talking, one of the questions came up with the important to look at and the reporting requirements. So some of these things may be turned over to police, and some may not be turned over to police, but simply listed on our, we have a monthly report, right? Where we used to have a monthly report, we have to see.
It's
The state-
posted.
yeah.
The suspension report,
Yeah, so we list the reasons and the
yes,
incidents.
they're under the titles of, you
Right.
know, the major, and there's another category.
Everything on there, everything that's on that report hasn't been reported to the police.
Right.
Because they don't want to start.
So there is, just to be clear, so within the other policies, there's a tie back to what's required and what's discretionary
Some of the policies where we must,
by state law. Those are the only ones that are a must.
yes, they're in the policy.
Okay, so where we have discretion, we're taking it.
Yeah.
Right.
Just trying to be flexible, but.
And I'll say to you that, you know, when they speak to the students at the beginning of every year, when they bring them down by grade level and the administrators speak to them, they tell them when they're going to involve policing. They're very clear when they will and, you know, when they may and when they won't. So, you know, there are, you know, if you're cutting school, you know, and you left school grounds and you get disciplined for that or suspended for that, we don't bring the police in the site, and that doesn't make sense. But, you know, some of the major infractions are, you know, involve the police.
You know, because we have it here, and I'm looking at students, but, you know, the incident where we talked about in the summer, where somebody had blown their truck with something, who was visiting the district, not an employee of the district, and not an employee of the district, not a student of the district, but they were using our facilities. You know, the interested in here that we really have the right to tell someone to leave our property. With that, it's when school is in session. I heard that we checked with council, they said that, but I really have to tell you, we're a semi-public property. And you know, the ACLU defended the Nazis marching at Skokie and the people who just walked in Charlottesville. But, you know, so I'm just skeptical. I'm querying about if that person had simply said no, or someone else does that with their vehicle, we don't have that potential. And we do on a student vehicle, you know, because that student's vehicle, you know, they're parking it there. So my question to you right now is, to get ahead of it, the parking permit process, do we include a phrase about bumper stickers and what can and cannot be on that or displayed on the vehicle?
I don't think so, do we?
Okay, because there I think we have more domain because that may encourage acts of aggression in our property between students of ours and goes back to that in their hours. But I do question whether we have an adult parking when the school is not in session on our property. A lot of things on bumper stickers I don't agree with, but it doesn't.
Well, that situation was a little bit different that he's referencing, right? That was a worker.
Right.
But it's a contractor.
Right.
But-
I mean, it wasn't, it was
Yeah.
there as an employee, you know, someone that we were paying to do services for us. I don't know if it changes it, I'm just saying, I think it's,
Yeah, that's, we can follow with that, but I asked if we would include some thought about what's our parking permits. Because,
I guess the only question I have with that, Jerry, and I'm not sure what the right answer is, but what's hard sometimes is when you begin to list the things that you don't list, then you have trouble enforcing because they say that wasn't on there. So because those kinds of things there's so many possibilities, you hate to have.
which is why we have to publish notice to people about what you can't put for our contractors. I just don't know I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I don't know, it's,
I mean, if someone has a pro-choice or, you know, or pro-life position on the bumper sticker, yeah, I don't want to get into legislating that.
Mhm.
You know, I just bring it up now because it's speech and it's what we do for discipline. Let's keep going.
Maybe that's under the
I need
expression
clarification
policy.
on something you said. You said we're a semi-public, semi-public buildings.
I said facilities. The use of our grounds, when we're not in session, they're a public asset. So they're not a private asset. Greenwood School is not in session.
Are they always a public asset?
Well, they're semi-public because when school's in session, we have the right to restrict access to our facilities. As compared to a private, where I can restrict it 24 hours a day and keep people off. My office.
He's asking about versus public, though, not versus private.
No,
Are they
no,
always public or
well,
private?
Okay, we can talk more about it. I just
Well, I'm
want
differentiating from private, and that's what I'm saying, whether they're public or semi-public, and they're semi-public because we do restrict access to
Right,
them.
I get it.
So Jerry, maybe I would say and I don't think we'll get to it tonight, but we have a student expression policy. Maybe that's where that conversation should be, because that might be more encompassing than just a vehicle.
So is there anything on 218 that you want to address? Good. I know we were trying to time box it to this time, I'm just looking to get to all 218 together, if that's all right. How many are there? There are that many.
4 of them? And really, in one sense, these are relatively easy because, well, 218.1, I believe, is relatively easy because it's school code that defines what we do. And, you know, we've implemented this policy in the past, so I think the board recognizes our process and what we do it and how we do it. So, fine. I don't know if you want to take a look at it.
Wait, I'm going to transfer to students.
Yes.
Part of that you said, I read that as somebody who's under an expulsion because of this comes to us because they're not going to their regular school. We reserve the right to treat them as an expulsion, put them in file as a record.
Correct, and they sign, the parents of that student sign an affidavit. That's the only way we might find out.
Which one do you want?
Records.
A lot of patients.
We're on weapons 218.1.
Okay.
Does this relate to 218.1, anybody have a problem?
No.
218.2?
Okay, so 218.2 speaks a little bit about what we talked about previously with some of these threats that are made. This is usually typically one that is broader than an individual, but this speaks to students making those kinds of statements or threats to our school or to individuals within the school and our response to that.
Can you do me a favor? And Matt, I'll look to you for more guidance, which is the communicate. I love that they include telex.
Assembly, like that too.
Yeah, yeah.
Assemblies. I know that.
Probably. But it doesn't include things such as SMS, social media, and so should it, is my question. No,
I think that's
messaging.
I think that's why they put internet, I don't know, in telephone and internet.
Well, and
So-
it says written or electronic means
Yeah.
using a telephone. Or written
So
media
cellular
text.
isn't necessarily.
That's what I was trying to say.
So what they said was, PSBA about this, they added the definition of communicate and terroristic threat in compliance with the definition stated in law. So,
That's what I was supposed to say.
Law tends to
Say again?
be 8 to 10 years behind technology, because that's just how long it takes to change the law. But it says electronic means, so I think that's good, because that would cover anything.
Yeah, and then it says including blah, 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 but it doesn't preclude anything else. So if somebody invents a device tomorrow, it's an electronic means.
Yeah, I was only thinking about it because so many of the other disciplinary actions we've had have required use of text messaging, SMS messaging.
It's just think of having an electronic or.
What was that?
No, I'm just asking, so you think that.
Yeah, I guess. You know.
I feel like we start listing them and then tomorrow there's a new way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, if you just said any form of communication.
Period.
Oil.
Yeah.
Not just telepathy.
Ooh.
Cans and string.
And just bags.
Yeah.
so here's an example of a may, of, Andy, about if you were to read it, talking about we may report these to the police.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Mark for the next one, since.
Are we good
Want
on,
to talk about vaping?
are we good on 2? 18.2?
Yeah.
So in 18.3 through 27 now, I guess it's.
Yeah, 227.
So I'll leave this up to the board's discretion. But they deleted, and I put it back in here for you to make sure you can see it, but they deleted the specific violations. So if you go under guidelines, I put in there again our first and second offenses for sale, distribution, possession, et cetera. And the reason why I did it, I understand what they're speaking to about maybe it should be procedural language, but this has been a big issue within the district in terms of what these penalties are. I didn't know if you wanted to keep it as policy language or you wanted to make it a administrative reg. And in doing so, I'm not sure what that does to you when you are addressing in a board hearing.
I think, especially these days, that we need to be really explicit, maybe go over the line, communicating what our policies are. Frankly, I am a fan of having the biggest, baddest turn out there. I don't care what anybody else has. It just sometimes gets to 45 days also from school. It's hard to turn. Or, I've always said there are other ways.
We just said you're one of the biggest and baddest deterrent. There you go. That
For some kids, that's not a
It doesn't have
deterrent.
to be 45 days outside of the classroom versus something else.
Well, it can be something else, right? So when we have a hearing, then the board members can do whatever they want.
Well, no, I don't think
Yeah,
so.
sure.
So,
Barry, the number.
in my recollection, in talking with Rob, or having watched some of these things in the past, it comes to,
227.
in the sense
That's their
that
change.
if it comes to us, we have a
Yeah,
choice
it's in
to
the number.
enforce or not enforce, if there's a hearing. I've never seen us do anything in the middle or change that.
I disagree. So I've been on a handful of hearings since I've been here.
Right.
And there's always, and I remember Rob saying, you can do what you want. I mean, these are your policies, but you can go in another direction.
It's like the
The
tennis.
issue-
You do it when somebody pays it.
The issue,
And change it, we just took it down to every licenses.
the issue comes to be, what do you want the administration to do?
Right.
Because they have to act and make a recommendation before we touch it. And so if they touch it and then we reduce it, and that becomes a pattern, then we get into a vicious cycle that says, he's following policy because he's got nothing, and we're knocking it down. So yeah, I'm gonna go to hearings every day, it's a practical matter.
So what are you saying, Andy? Would you suggest, your point's
No,
well
I
taken.
don't think, frankly, it's a discussion for tonight. I just, and it's not at the very top of my priorities, I just personally struggle with taking any student out of the classroom as a punishment, when having them in the classroom is one of the, it's kind of our favorite.
I argued against it, I lost in fact, I had an administrator for both high schools in front, and they advocated for it. The middle ground that we seem to strike is, we rely upon them, I don't know, put it way down. And it's not like he hasn't come before us, he hasn't come before us before and said, hey, this is what it is. But this is the item, this is what it was, this was the circumstance. Ameliorate, mitigate.
I do want to remind the board that previously this was 45 school days. That's what the expulsion was. And it was changed to 45 calendar days, which probably changes it to about 30 school days or so. So I'm not trying to convince you this is the
Well,
right
and there's a
number,
spring
but
break thrown in there too.
yeah, and you're right, timing can make a difference on the number
The
of
kids are
days.
very clear about how late in the year that they can get in trouble in their senior year.
And still graduate.
No, and still welcome graduation.
Yeah,
So
that's what I'm
it's
saying.
It's the same way they plan their absences. But there's no way that my daughter's absences from school this year, my senior, they game the system. So she figured out how to, if you leave at 11 o'clock, or if you come in at 11 o'clock, half days don't count as absences. This is the same thing. They figure it out. I am a huge fan of this policy. Huge. I think it is an enormous deterrent for the volume. When I sat on the IU and some of the other boards, the amount that other school districts have of drug and alcohol, we have the toughest policy, we have the least amount. I am an enormous supporter.
That kid at 45 days is sacrificial lamb for 2 years.
2 years,
Okay,
it's
Sharon,
2 years. Talk to some of the other school board members about how much they have.
I got an issue right now with the involvement in the situation with opioids. Anything I can put up to be a deterrent. Take out the pinky, I don't care. Not joking. Whatever you want to put up to be a deterrent.
There's a capital fund something.
It's not that, but you know what I'm saying.
Did you guys just see Cranberry
For court law.
an advisory committee around this?
Opioids?
Not that I'm looking for another committee, but with drug problem that's, that's out there, might not be a bad idea to have.
Glad Bill's not here.
What's that?
Glad Bill's not here. We don't get an earful. I think it's a good policy, just getting back to the 45 days. And, you know, again, sitting on these committees, I've seen kids crying over the 45 days, so.
Yeah, and
They
45,
know they don't wanna do it.
Right.
It's, again, Mark, just so I'm clear, it's not the 45 days, it's just being out of the classroom for a period of time.
Yeah, and then I worry, so if we do 45 days in school suspension, right?
Immediately.
That would feel punitive but the thing is, I think we're putting extra stressors on the staff.
And
Because someone
frankly,
has to monitor those kids.
the kids would be, you're gonna come finish, that's just weird, but I don't agree. I think it, just like we don't have an absent problem, because we said these kids wanna go to school, telling them they're not gonna be able to go to class is a deterrent, that's the population we have. Barry, you're not agreeing?
No, I do agree. No, I think we're fine. Our
Okay.
students want to
We're
be in
6
school.
minutes over.
I just want to make sure that we are not, there are no references to our use of Twilight or other program is not part of this last one.
It's not a
Mark,
problem.
there's
two
maybe
more
he's not here.
in this
Not here.
class.
So, okay, so one thing to the three, right?
So you want the penalty in the policy?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
so does everybody else know that, the building principal who has a reasonable suspicion, the student may be required to submit to drug or alcohol testing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you know,
I think it's reasonable, I just
you know
calling
what,
that to
you know
you.
what? Good luck doing it.
Is that not frequently done?
We've done it at proms,
Yeah.
dances. We do it with our nurse if it's in a school setting.
Yeah, you can do it at the prom. You can't do it when I'm coming to school. You can't tell me if I don't take the piss test that you're not going to be in school.
No, but we take them, if there are medical concerns, we take them to the nurse's office and they are then taken to the hospital where they will.
They're not drawing blood without,
Well, no, without parent permission, you're right.
okay.
No, you're right. I mean, there's some limitations to what we can do.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, you can't
Yes.
physically do it, but.
Right. But remember, oftentimes you're finding other factors that are a part of this that
Well, I-
you know they violated the policy even without.
I got you, I just want to be careful because, you know, our ability to do certain things is not, you know, we have a police officer around who has a certain level. We have a slightly lesser level to inspect. But, you know, your constitutional rights still exist.
Yeah.
You know,
Our parents have been very cooperative
Same
in these
result.
conditions.
so
So they.
kids are amazingly cooperative. Okay, last one of the day.
Just saying.
No, it's not. So, 218.5.
Well, 14 student expression, which could be a little bit longer if you want to talk about some of these other things.
You want to come back to that, so let's, want to do that question call, we were here 8:30.
You could probably do dressing grooming if you want to get that off. Again, I think it's relatively generous. That's 221 now.
We used to be friends.
It's this, if you think it'll be long, then we'll wait, but it's one page. And really,
How long have you been on this?
Use a calculator, Barry. Use a
Yeah.
calculator.
So you can take a quick look. It just, it talks about those generalities. If it's a safety hazard, if it's a health hazard, if it's, it's broad, so it is open to some discretion.
As long as your fingers.
Looks good to me.
Yes.
All right, if it's good.
Voila.
Election officers, staff members shall be instructed to demonstrate by example.
Agreed.
Hold on, I'm just trying to make sure, do we no longer differentiate by gender?
Maybe we should add parents. Staff members and parents shall be instructed to
In the
demonstrate.
dress.
No, it's very general.
I'm just trying to make sure.
You're gonna adjourn it?
All right, there is no public comment. Thanks for those people who spent an hour and 10 minutes with us. And if you want to come back.
Thanks for your.
221 now.
Thanks, guys.